Okay, I think we'll get started. We may have more people coming in. Welcome everyone to this Creative OT webinar. I'm not sure if that's me, that noise. Could you make sure you're all muted? I'm Alex Coulter, Director of the National Centre for Creative Health, and we're hosting this event in partnership with the Royal College of Occupational Therapists and the University College London Masters in Creative Health. Great to see so many people here, and we're in Zoom meeting mode, which means we can all see each other, which means we can be quite interactive, and you can all contribute to discussions through the morning. Please do keep yourself muted unless you are speaking. Could you all check if you're muted now? Because I can see some people who aren't. We can mute you, forcibly mute you if necessary. We'll be recording the webinar to share with everyone who signed up today. We had 70 people signed up, and we've currently got 46 in the room, and we do have about 80 people on the waiting list, unfortunately, but because we only have a limit of 100 in this Zoom mode, we couldn't let more people in. If you prefer not to be visible for the recording, which has already started, but we can always edit you out, please feel free to switch off your video at the bottom left of your screen. Please do say who you are in the chat and communicate with each other and us throughout the event. It's always lovely to know who's here and what you do and what you're interested in. So I'll briefly talk about the work of the National Centre for Creative Health, and then I'm going to ask Karen Orman to speak about the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, and Helen Chatterjee to introduce herself and the Masters at UCL as our two partners in the event. So the National Centre for Creative Health was set up in response to recommendation 1 in the Creative Health Report, which was published in 2017 after a 2-year inquiry led by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing. We launched the NCCH in March 2021. We've been working in partnership with NHS England on a programme of creative health hubs with integrated care systems to embed creative health across systems. And in the first year, we worked with 4 systems. And some of this area of work is around workforce development, which is obviously relevant to today's webinar. So the systems that we worked with in the first year are Gloucestershire, West Yorkshire, Suffolk and North East Essex, and Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. And we're working on, or we will soon be publishing a toolkit based on that work. And then we will be working to spread the learning across other systems and regions. We're also working on small pilot projects, our huddles, to explore co-production with people with lived experience and creative health approaches. And we work with partners on knowledge exchange hives, and this event is an example of that. So working with other organisations on collaborative events to exchange knowledge and learning. We have a research partnership with the Arts and Humanities Research Council and other research councils with a focus on health inequalities and community assets, which is led by Professor Helen Chatterjee, who's here with us today. And we work with Helen and her team to support the Creative Health Masters at UCL, which Helen will talk about in a minute, and which Hannah Sercombe, who is organising this event, is on. Finally, we have just launched a creative health review with the aim to make recommendations for a cross-government strategy. The review involves a series of public roundtables on 7 themes. The first was last week on mental health and wellbeing across the life course, and the next one is on health inequalities and is on the 1st of December. We will put the links in the chat for further information on the Creative Health Review, and we're particularly keen to encourage people to come to the roundtables and also to send us information as part of our call for contributions. This event today is an important learning event for us to better understand how we can work collaboratively on developing the workforce in the growing area of creative health. There is increasing need for skilled practitioners to deliver creative activities for people with challenging and complex health and wellbeing needs. And there is much that creative practitioners can learn from occupational therapy, and hopefully potential for us to work together in the future. So I'm going to hand over to Karen Orman now to introduce herself and the Royal College of Occupational Therapists.
Morning, everyone. Thank you. So I am Director of Practice and Innovation at the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, and I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about the focus of the work that we're doing within that directorate, because we are a directorate that started in March, so we're fairly new and may be unfamiliar to members. Our main focus, we've got sort of, I think of the various pillars, but our main pillar is around responsibility for workforce. So we are thinking from pre-reg education onwards, so future workforce and ongoing. Leadership, so we have a focus on developing leadership within the profession, supporting our future leaders, but really celebrating and working very closely in partnership with existing leaders. And the other two key areas are around innovation and research. And we are about to go in next month piloting a new innovation hub. So this webinar and the work of creative health around creative health fits really well within that. We are looking at where occupational therapists are delivering innovative practice, and we're looking at capturing that and being able to share the learning from that for our members, but also to eventually make this a go-to site so that decision makers within health and social care can really understand the value and how occupational therapists can drive service improvement, and how they capture that service improvement for the local populations that they serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And over to Helen Chatterjee.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks, Alex. It's lovely to be here. I'm Helen Chatterjee. I'm a Professor of Human and Ecological Health at UCL and the founder and Programme Director for the Masters in Creative Health, which we launched in partnership with the National Centre for Creative Health and many other national, regional and local partners with whom we couldn't run our programme. So we're enormously grateful to all of those partnerships. So as I say, we launched the programme last year with a view to working with a new generation of people interested in supporting creative and community-based approaches to tackling health inequalities and to mainstreaming personalised care and person-centred care. So I'm really delighted that this collaboration between the RCOT and the NCCH has come about thanks to the drive and ambition of one of our fantastic students, Hannah Searcombe, who you're going to meet in a second. She was in our first cohort of students and, in the true spirit of creative health, instantly saw the potential for growing our movement of creative health by linking up two national bodies, and her efforts are the resulting in today's event, which she has curated. So we're enormously grateful and proud of Hannah, and we hope that you'll enjoy today's event. I'm really, really looking forward to it. Thank you all for having me, and over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your kind words, Helen. That's so kind. So as Helen said, my name's Hannah. I'm an occupational therapist, and this past year I completed the MASc in creative health. I graduated, like many of you perhaps, as an OT into the pandemic, and entered the profession because of its roots in arts and health, and it being an inherently creative profession. I should say I'm quite breathless because I'm recovering from a back injury, so bear with me. But yeah, anyway, I myself have lived experience of disability and have benefited from the life-changing impact creative OT brings to an individual. And we know this is because of so many reasons. We know this because occupation is anything and everything that individuals do to occupy themselves. Occupation is a group of activities in everyday life which are named, organised and given meaning by the people taking part in these occupations. And in OT, occupations are viewed as a basic human need which helps us organise behaviour, enable expression, manage self-identity, social identity, and time. And when faced with a kind of change of circumstances, engagement in occupation can be diminished, and it's in these times that creativity can be a really valuable tool in the healing process. Art-based interventions aren't new, as we all know, and have been used in OT since its foundation. The National Centre, as you now know, was formed in response to the Creative Health Report, the result of a 2-year inquiry led by the all-party parliamentary group on arts, health and wellbeing. The National Centre for Creative Health aims to foster the conditions for creative health to be integral to health and social care and wider systems. And the Royal College exists to step up for OT, helping people everywhere value the life-changing power of occupational therapy. Now, knowing these leading charities share the aim of supporting the development of an informed workforce to meet the growing demands for creative health programmes and activities, a group of individuals from the NCCH, RCOT and MASc, and those of us here who've been introducing ourselves came together and pulling together a webinar like this, as we've all discussed, takes input and contribution from so many people that you may not see here today. Paul Cooper is one who not only has championed the work of innovative creative practice, but has been instrumental in working in partnership with the National Centre, the MASc, and myself, which can't always be easy. In the history of creative OT, many individuals' contributions are unseen, but remain so significant. And today you'll hear from a variety of speakers who have really for decades championed the role of creativity and advocated the role occupational therapy plays in facilitating it. And that's why we're thrilled you've decided to join us today. We're seeking to demonstrate, as Alex has said, the profession's role in working creatively in and with the creative sector to address people's health and care needs in innovative ways, showcasing several successful examples to highlight the opportunities for OT that exist beyond statutory services. We hope this will allow you to generate new ideas and contacts and to think differently about addressing the factors that influence people's health needs, including the wider determinants of health. So to do that, we'll begin by introducing 4 wonderful presentations, as I said, to showcase some of the exciting work that's been going on across the nation. Unfortunately, one of our guests, Helen, can't be with us in person, so hers will be screened later on. And the first 2 presentations will be followed by a Q&A. So please do submit any questions directly to me in the chat, and our guests will answer as many as they can. So to begin, it's a pleasure to introduce to you Marcus Janus and Larry Watson. Both are newly qualified OTs working in statutory services in Northumberland, and they'll be presenting on bringing the museum to you, facilitating the integration of arts and culture in healthcare settings.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. I'll just share my screen if you just bear with me. Can everybody see what I'm sharing so far? Can everybody see that? Yeah, lovely, thank you. Okay, so just as part of our presentation, we aim to review our role emerging placement working with museums and how we integrated the integrated arts and culture into healthcare settings.
Yeah, so we'll just start by quickly introducing ourselves, as Hannah's kindly done there as well. So I'm Marcus Janus, and I'm an occupational therapist for Sunderland Royal Hospital with South Tyneside and Sunderland NHS Trust.
And hi everybody, my name is Larry Watson and I'm also an occupational therapist working with adult social care for Northumberland County Council. I'm conscious my internet's a little bit dodgy, so I don't know if everybody can hear me all right, because Marcus was going in and out there as well. But anyway, I'll carry on. As part of this presentation, we aim to review our role emerging placement working with museums. And just to start, really, we're just going to give you a brief reflection of how it all came about.
Yeah, so hopefully you can all hear me. So when myself and Larry initially heard about our role emerging placements with Tyne and Wear Archives and Museums, my thoughts, and indeed the thoughts of others on the course, were, so what will this involve? And I wonder what I will be doing. And it highlights just how the link between museums and health was not immediately clear, or as clear as it perhaps should be. And when we both read the Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance short report, and it became a lot clearer just how obvious it is that museums, arts, and culture are so closely linked to health and wellbeing. And we think it should be more obvious to people in society how much arts and wellbeing are linked.
So our mission was to highlight the strong links arts and culture have with health and wellbeing. And we did this by enhancing the museum's activity boxes and creating a resource filled with evidence and theory for other healthcare workers to use autonomously, and also translate the creativity of arts and culture into clinical results.
Yeah, so we also wanted to skill share and combine the healthcare workers' experience and knowledge of that specific service user with our clinical knowledge of occupational therapy theory, and combine those two to deliver the best outcome for the participants.
And by working in collaboration, the NHS and museums can provide opportunities for people to experience meaningful activities in different environments. And as you all know, obviously with occupational therapy, it was really important for us to back what we learned and what we created with evidence. And just to provide some kind of quotes there, studies suggest that engagement in arts and culture have shown promise for improving quality of life and well-being in older adults, from better memory and self-esteem to reduced stress and increased social interaction.
So in our activity booklets, we also then looked at things such as the theory behind the activity. So for example, we considered reminiscence theory, such as using smell to stimulate deep-rooted memories. We added in a risk assessment. So that looked at the risks associated with the objects in the box. We looked at the environment and the equipment, and considered how the environment can influence participants' engagement. We looked at the session times and how many participants we would recommend for the activity. We looked at grading the activities. So this involved splitting the activity boxes into 2 grades to account for different levels of cognitive function. And we provided examples in the booklet to help guide the user on how to do that. We also added in OT assessments and outcome measures and a feedback form at the end. Another thing we'd added in was the My Childhood. So this was a way to gather childhood information, which helped to initiate meaningful conversations. We added in an activity analysis. So this was to establish the participants' functional levels. And we also added in the pool activity, so the pool activity level. And we did this beforehand as it was useful to determine how the activity is presented. And then we also added in the occupational therapy task observational scale. This is an outcome measure we used to assess the participants' overall performance. And finally, we had an interests checklist, which was useful to establish which activity box the service users would be interested in doing moving forward.
So you're probably interested in kind of what kind of things were in these activity boxes. So we've provided some examples. We've got 3 examples here. First one being the Roman herbs box. And I'll just kind of briefly tell you what each box was about. This one we looked at kind of Roman history. We provided facts and interesting information around Roman history. Service users had the opportunity to hold different artifacts, which helped stimulate discussions of their own pasts. We handed around different herbs to smell, which again encouraged reminiscence. We also had Egyptian cosmetics. Again, we discussed Egyptian history, specifically around cosmetics on this one, which bizarrely the men actually preferred to go through this one than the women. It was really fun. We handed around artifacts again, and we had different graded activities such as colouring and even making their own lip scrub. And then just our final example there is the Newcastle non-walking tour. So we created sensory balloons, which represented the service users. We moved these around the map and discussed the history of the buildings years ago to present day. And again, just promoting discussion around the service users past, and again, reminiscence theory stimulating conversations.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I gave an initial reflection that myself and Larry had before the whole placement began. And we also have another reflection, and this is towards the end of the placement. And it's just to say that as the weeks went on, we had many more examples of the connection between art and culture and health and well-being. And an example that sticks in my mind is seeing a dementia patient who we were informed by the staff that they were struggling to get them to engage in any activity. She joined our activity group box session, which was the Egyptian cosmetics one that Larry's just mentioned. And although the patient didn't follow all of the session, there was one specific activity in it, which was just to colour in the Egyptian picture. And the patient was immersed in this activity and chose to focus on this for the whole session. And for the first time in a long time, she was displaying high levels of concentration and showing volition and motivation and pride in what she was doing. So we had found something that she wanted to engage in, and the impact that it had on her mood was visible immediately. And it really was a powerful thing to see.
Definitely, yeah, I agree. Also, at the end of our presentation, or our placement, sorry, we really wanted to gather some feedback to see how impactful our work had been. So I've took some quotes out and I've posted them on these slides, so you can read these at your own leisure. But I've pulled out this one here from Jo. So Jo was our our educational leader who actually works at the museum. So I'll just quickly read out what she said. Marcus and Larry have been helpful at this stage by contributing a clinical perspective on the museum resources. They've added to our museum sessions by adding graded activities for people with different abilities and provided feedback on what worked with participants and what could be improved. Going forward, we'll be working alongside healthcare professionals using these resources, and the students have helped museum staff see things from a healthcare perspective. The placement couldn't have come at a better time. Thanks so much. That was from Jo. I'm not sure if we mentioned actually also that we delivered our activity boxes in a dementia ward. I don't know if we mentioned that in the presentation. There's just some other feedback there as well.
Yeah, so our learning experiences and what we gained from it, I think we learned to utilise community resources and to reach out to wider networks. And it kind of poses the question of why isn't this done more, really? We had the opportunity to carry out a presentation giving an overview of our project to a placement innovation group, which had various leaders in the NHS trusts. And the feedback from this has led to meetings to develop the collaboration between Northumbria University, Tyne & Wear Archives and Museums, and also CNTW NHS Foundation Trust to consider how further placements could be arranged, even with other allied health profession courses, and also to further strengthen the link between healthcare, museums, arts and culture. And the experience has inspired us to be more innovative and creative in our own interventions now as we're practicing occupational therapists. I think as well, just a final point to add, to carry on such work in the future, we think that the profession needs RCOT and the universities to advocate for creative interventions like these. And we need more collaborations between museums, arts, culture and healthcare. And we think that university placements are a great way to start these collaborations and to demonstrate their value.
Thanks very much for listening. And if you've got any questions, please go ahead. I'll stop sharing my screen as well. Just 2 seconds.
Thank you both. I think we'll go on to questions just after the next presentation.
All right. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, but thank you so much for that. It's so exciting to see the progress which is happening in placements, in particular, you know, shaping students' learning experiences and really opening up OT expectations of what creative practices can look like outside of statutory services. And it was particularly exciting to hear about the variety of assessments that you used and that you were able to apply, you know, further demonstrating how OT skill sets can be universally applicable. So we're now going to move on to our next presentation. I'm really excited to introduce Becca Fortescue and Drew Potter. Becca is a highly specialist paediatric OT and Drew is a highly regarded project manager, and they both work at Breathe Arts and Health Research on the Magic Intensive Therapy programme, and they'll be presenting on how OTs can work with magicians to create magic. Just love that title. Take it away, guys.
Thanks so much, Hannah. I'm just going to try and share my screen, so bear with me a moment. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, Drew, I will let you start us off.
So, hi everyone. Did you ever think that as occupational therapists that you could be working with magic circle magicians? My name is Drew Potter and I'm a project manager for Breathe Arts Health Research, a not-for-profit social enterprise. I'm also here with my colleague Rebecca Fortescue. who's one of our joint clinical lead occupational therapists. It's really wonderful to be a part of today's Create Health webinar. So a little bit about us here at Breathe. We design and deliver world-class creative programmes underpinned by scientific research to improve the health and well-being of children, young people and adults for over a decade. We are one of the first arts and health organisations to be recognised by NHS England for our work, and we have recently delivered training for the World Health Organisation. We work with a broad range of artists, healthcare professionals and researchers across many different art forms, including music, dance, visual arts, poetry and magic, to create impactful experiences that support health and well-being. Each one of our creative programmes look to address a specific physical or mental health need, so it's vital for us that we collaborate from the beginning with experts. For example, singing with mothers for postnatal depression, dance for older adults, supporting their strength and balance, and also magic for young people with hemiplegia. Over to Becca.
Thank you so much, Drew. Okay, so for many years, occupational therapists have been using meaningful occupations to engage and support clients. I believe Breathe Arts Health Research really hero this. Now to discuss why magic. The occupational therapists at Breathe have worked closely with magic circle magicians since 2008 to develop and teach magic tricks that elicit specific hand and arm skills. These hand and arm skills impact on young people who have hemiplegia's occupational participation. The magic provides opportunities for learning how your two hands work together, supination, elbow extension, manipulation. I could go on. All activities during the camp are graded to the individual's abilities and goals. The Breathe Magic programme is run just like a summer camp, just like the young magicians' peers or siblings will be attending too. It focuses on the fun and what they can do rather than what they can't do. We are so lucky to be working with some of the top magicians in the country and the world. They inspire the young people to work hard to get better at magic and give them the gift of top-class magic that they can then share with others too. Interspersed throughout the 2 weeks is learning performance skills and supporting each other as a group. At the end of the camp, there's a magic show to celebrate their achievements. We use evidence-based practice within the magic and everyday setup of the 2-week camp to support independence, physical and psychosocial skills. The camp is appropriate for 7 to 19-year-olds who can remember a 3 to 4 step sequence, can work as part of a group and are keen to learn magic. Their families can self-refer or healthcare professionals can refer them. Several studies have found that there are significant participation differences between typically developing children and those with cerebral palsy. Due to inconsistencies in service provision across the UK, the majority of young people with hemiplegia have no access to intensive bimanual therapies, despite this approach receiving a green light in systematic reviews and being supported by NICE guidelines. Breathe subsidised places to make the camp more accessible and also offer bursaries. The group model focuses on the occupation of magic. It differs from traditional therapies and has supported many young people to make progress who have previously struggled to engage in traditional therapy. One of the comments that has stuck with me when I was co-presenting with Kat, who attended the camp when she was 19, she said she was a really busy teenager, completing her A-levels, trying to have a social life. She did not have time to focus on weekly therapy. She said it just didn't get done, but coming away for 2 weeks and really focusing on what she wanted to achieve was just worked really well for her. I know that's not the same for everyone, but I think having differing models really helps give people options. To ensure a holistic intervention, we facilitate disability awareness and acceptance discussions. We provide a parent support group and we promote psychosocial skills alongside physical skills and independence. So we don't have enough time to discuss these today, but we do complete comprehensive assessments pre and post camp that include these. Our outcome measures are focused on participation and look at both child and parent views. For those who aren't familiar, bimanual intensive therapy and the model we use is the acquisition of two-handed skills through the repetition of carefully chosen, goal-specific bimanual activities and magic tricks. Bimanual intensive therapy and goal-oriented approaches are supported by research and NICE guidelines and improve the functional benefits of adjuncts to therapy such as botulinum toxin A injections. As already discussed, we pull on a variety of research and guidelines. Modern motor learning theory underpins the intensive camp model alongside the goal-directed practice that is interwoven into the day. The programme is bespoke to each young magician with one-to-one support, meaning we can adjust the content to meet their specific strengths and needs. The group model provides the motivation, friendships, peer support and opportunity to grow together. The creative occupation supports the doing, being, becoming and belonging. You'd think as an OT I'd have that one down by now. We've also included growth mindset and a strengths focus in the teaching by the magicians and the feedback we provide to each other as a group. Okay, so a bit more about what the day looks like for the young people. Interspersed throughout the day is a functional skill practice. There is a big focus around mealtime independence. Every snack and lunchtime, the young people prepare their snacks and food. This may be wraps that we need to eat with 2 hands, making pizzas where we have to chop toppings and grate cheese, or simply opening and cutting up a banana. The children are introduced to adaptive equipment where appropriate, but the focus is on planning their movements to effectively carry out the task. The camp adopts motor learning theory, so repetition, quality of movements, active learning, and the just right challenge are really important. In addition, there is explicit learning teaching children specific strategies so that they can apply these to many different situations and activities. We teach the role of the helper and the doer hand. Each of those have different roles. And we also, teach how to do things like sort out your helper hand first before you think about your doer hand. All those strategies are interwoven throughout the day. Integrated into the programme is practice of their daily goals with coaching to support progress. The children have opportunities to play games and do circus skills that require 2 hands, and they also sew and decorate their magical outfits for the final performance at the end of the camp. A real focus within Breathe Arts Health research is kindness. Breathe Magic provides a nurturing environment that encourages a sense of community, friendliness and kindness in all aspects of the camp. We integrate performance skills into the programme, and at the end of the camp, the young magicians showcase their skills for their family members in a performance, followed by watching a short film of their achievements and celebrating together. Throughout camp, the young people are coached to develop a growth mindset, focusing on what they can do, alongside considering the actions they could take to improve their performance. Every day as a group, we celebrate achieving their self-set goals, teamwork, kindness, resilience. We're passionate about promoting the occupational therapy profession, so we provide opportunities for qualified and student occupational therapists to volunteer as magic trainers. This is a one-to-one role supporting the young people during the programme with support from the clinical leads. We learn from the magic trainers too, as they often bring their own creative occupations that can be included in our manual play sessions. We offer 2 training sessions to the magic trainers to share the underpinning theories and research and to upskill them on the OT process at Breathe Magic. Okay, so this is the nitty-gritty. What does the research show us? Breathe Magic increased usage of the young people's helper hands by 61%. This was sustained after a follow-up at 3 months, regardless of age, severity of movement restriction, or nationality. A further study showed that 92% of children had improvements in bimanual ability, and 75% of the young people maintained their improvement after a follow-up 6 weeks later. Our research and research from other magic camps shows that participants had clinically significant improvements in bimanual motor skills and improved independence and participation in daily activities. These skills were well maintained at the 6-month follow-up assessments. Following Breathe Magic, young people and their parents report improved movement skills and a greater ability to perform physical daily tasks at 6 months follow-up, and reductions in hours of care and support from parents following the young person's participation in the programme due to their newfound independence. Throughout parent and child interviews, activities of daily living were repeatedly highlighted, including dressing, showering, packing their lunch for school, cutting food, and tying shoelaces. The positive and frequent reporting of these benefits suggests they provide a virtuous cycle of improvements, leading to more engagement and effort, leading to more improvements. However, it is notable that these mechanisms relating to physical capabilities were in fact only the 3rd most frequently reported mechanism of change. Other psychological, social and motivational factors also appear key to how and why Breathe Magic achieves its clinical benefits. The most frequently discussed mechanisms of change by both parents and children were changes in reflective motivation as a result of participating in Breathe Magic. Bit more about the research, nearly done. International studies recognise it is extremely difficult to motivate children to do the high intensity practice that is required for motor learning. Magic-themed bimanual intensive therapy programmes use a novel learning medium to motivate young people to achieve their goals. MAGIC themed programmes have been shown to work equally with more severe hemiplegia, negating previous clinical concerns that it was only suitable for individuals with mild hemiplegia. Parents describe the benefit of the non-medical approach for children's motivation as a further mechanism of change. 71% of young people with hemiplegia experience mild to severe psychosocial and emotional difficulties. An important determinant of this is decreased self-esteem. Following Breathe Magic, parents reported improvements in self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-motivation. The children were also keen to keep trying to do things without parental support or prompting, and had improved comfort in discussing their diagnosis and a willingness amongst them to try new things. Parents further highlighted improved optimism themselves about their child's future and increased confidence in their child's ability to achieve unexpected things. Young people reported developing new friendships at Breathe Magic Camp, helped with social integration at school, and they reported increased feelings of pride, decreased frustration, increased independence, a decrease in self-punishing behaviours, and improved feelings of helpfulness and emotional regulation. So because I don't have much time, I'm not going to touch on this much today, but just to say, bimanual intensive therapy has been shown to increase brain activation in the affected hemisphere and increase white matter integrity. So I think that's always important to just touch on quickly. So thank you so much for listening. I think we have some questions now.
And I'm going to step in here and just say thank you to our speakers and start to host the questions. I'm absolutely fascinating presentations, and I just think, you know, you can just see the links with occupations and you know, the creative arts, and just, you know, we talk about being holistic, and what just doesn't get captured within sort of traditional medical approach to working with people is picking up the sort of the social, the emotional and the psychological needs and addressing that. And I think, Becky, you so beautifully illustrated what a difference that can make in terms of motivating and engaging people, but actually the impact on their lives. So the first question I've got was initially addressed to Larry and Marcus, but I'm actually going to address it to all three of you. And I'm just pulling it up. I seem to have lost it, and my screen's just jumped. So it's really thinking about, and perhaps you can just talk us through, particularly Larry and Marcus, a little bit about the outcome measures that you used, and just the impact and how that sort of ensured a legacy for this project. And the second question is, has there been a legacy? Has the work continued now that your placement has finished?
Marcus, do you want to talk about the outcome measures, and I'll just discuss what's happened since our placement?
Yeah. So it was the observational therapy task. Occupational therapy task observational scale. So you can search OTTOS, OTTOS. So that was a pre-existing outcome measure which we used. On our placements, it's worth adding as well. So we had a NHS clinical lead that we were working with, who we could go to, and she was really useful in providing, you know, some advice on tools that we could use as well, such as that one. So yeah, that's what we used for that. In terms of legacy and, you know, has it now been carried on? From what we understand, they did say that they were setting up more placements, didn't they, Larry? And the actual boxes themselves, they've been using them since. And I had a student a couple of months later, and there was a student on a placement, and he'd heard about our activity boxes, and he wanted to use that with a charity he was working with. So they have been used and carried on.
Yeah, just to back up what Marcus was saying there with regards to the outcome measures, one in particular, until we came to this dementia ward, there was participants that weren't actually participating in anything that the activity users were doing. So bringing in this museum was a completely different breath of fresh air. And as Marcus was saying in one of the reflections, there was a participant who engaged in something that she's never engaged in before. So I think it's just keeping things fresh, keeping things new and innovative. You know, people are more kind of likely to participate in it. And with regards to the legacy, we held an innovation meeting with other lecturers from universities, and they're actually now wanting to bring kind of something very similar on board with their own universities and see if we can get more students in museums and looking at these placements. And also our presentation's been carried around through all the universities, not all, sorry, but a selected few universities, and they're using our activity boxes within their own placements within charities, and they can contact Joe, and there's about 34 different boxes that they can get hold of. So they're still going, and I think Joe just wants more students so she can keep up with the demand.
I think that's fantastic, because so often we hear about innovative placements, innovative pilots, and actually then when it's finished, even when there's demonstrated value, it then doesn't continue. So I think that this is a really important aspect. So the question I wanted to ask all three of you was, what do we think the barriers are to the creative health movement accessing and utilising occupational therapy research and theory, especially considering they're so inextricably linked? And have you got any thoughts about how we might break down those barriers to improve the knowledge sharing? Becca, I'll come to you first and then perhaps go back to Larry and Marcus.
I mean, I think one of the biggest barriers is trying to let people outside our profession know that we've been researching this for years. I think social prescribing's become this big new thing, and people think it's really new, and we're like, hello, we've been doing this for years. So I think it's us being really strong advocates for what we do. We need more OTs getting up and speaking about what they do, writing case studies, trying to publish where they can, and just sharing outside of our profession. I think we're quite good at sharing within our profession, but stepping outside is more challenging. I can't remember the end of the question. I'm so sorry, I got off.
I'm just wondering, what do you think what might we do to address some of the barriers so that we improve the knowledge sharing? But I think you've tackled that, and I would agree. And also, tell RCOT about it, because we have the opportunity to speak at national levels, but also to connect people up. And I do think this sort of fits in with, I was talking about the practice and innovation team around leadership. I think occupational therapists are fantastic at leading from behind and supporting other people, but we're perhaps a little less confident at sort of standing up and leading from the front. And I think your point, Becca, about we need to go out there and shout about what we're doing is really important. So here from my point of view. Larry or Marcus, have you got anything else to add?
I think the barrier that we really came across was that we didn't really know much about it. And why did we not know much about it? I'm thinking, is that something that perhaps maybe the universities can embed in their modules and kind of look at social subscribing and maybe challenge students to be more innovative? We were only presented with this idea because we were put in a museum and we're like, oh, wow, gosh, what's all this about? And then that's kind of getting our cogs working. But I think if you weren't put in that museum, would your cogs work as much as ours did? So I think maybe it's more kind of embedding it in the actual modules, perhaps more in university.
Yeah, and absolutely, and thinking more creatively about our placements. Yeah, I'd agree. Okay, so Marcus, anything to add, or shall I move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think really just what you said, Becca, about having more of that, just letting people know that there's a lot of research already there to challenge the kind of medical-based models where it's it's all about data and research. Well, if there is already all that data there to support the arguments, then let's get it out there and push that really. So, yeah,
and I think that that emphasis that it's just headlines. Sort of 92% of children experienced improvement, 75% maintained improvement 6 weeks on. We have to report like the medical model to actually capture and engage, and that leads very nicely onto the third question asked. OTs are rooted, occupational therapy is rooted in creative health and art production and engagement, and increasing accessibility to creative activity for all. Have we strayed too far from our roots and conformed to the medical model in order to gain recognition? And how do we stop the same thing happening to the creative health movement? Do you know what? You could have asked this question over 30 years ago when I first qualified. It's, we keep going around with this, but any thoughts? Becca, I'll come to you first.
I mean, as you say, it's the age-old question, isn't it? I think it's hard. We have to get funding. Sometimes you have to comply with certain models. That is a challenge that I'm sure we all face. But I think coming back to occupation is the most important thing that we can do, remembering our training. I think actually going back to what you two were saying earlier, in that students are a really great place to do this because they are in the throes of occupation and occupational science, and it's really deep rooted in everything you're learning at university, so it's still really fresh. So actually you guys coming out and doing your placements are probably some of the best people to do this and push what we're doing, because I think sometimes we get diluted by the medical model slightly. I think it's a real big fight sometimes to move more into that social model when so many people you're working with and the systems you're accessing or trying to get clients to move through are the medical model. So yes, it's lots of challenges, but again, I think it goes back to that advocating piece. We've got to advocate for why. We've got to think about almost how to play the system. How can we report in those medical model ways while staying true to occupational science and occupation in what we do?
Absolutely. And I think actually you were doing some of your activities in a dementia inpatient unit, weren't you? So actually I should imagine that was quite embedded in the medical model. Was there sort of any challenges or learning that you took away from that?
Expect the unexpected. I think really was more so emphasis was really on grading, because you have so many different cognitive levels when you're presenting this to them. And I think really the eye-opener to the museum was they'd never considered grading before. They had this museum box that they would take out. When we came in offered our kind of expertise, we looked at different grading so that everybody could be part of this. And that's something that Jo's taken away. And whenever she now creates it, she looks at different grading. So I suppose, yeah, in terms of medical, we are always linking back to it, but I think as well, trying to make sure our activities are meaningful.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, linking in the occupational therapy theory with evidence base behind it, and having the outcome measures, adding all these things meant we could use that creativity, but then also provide the data to show its value to keep other sides happy as well. But that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And then a question about funding. Things always come back to funding ultimately, don't they? How do we find these projects to be sustained and spread? How can we roll out the impact and adoption of these models? Becca, I'll come to you because you've touched on funding.
I think that's the magical question, isn't it? We'd all like to know the answer. I mean, I can speak about what we've done. Breathe came out of Guys and St Tommy's charity with occupational therapists and magicians who had an idea, and that worked their way through that, and are now a well-established not-for-profit organisation with lots of different programmes running. So source funding through many ways. I think it's finding the right people at the right time, to be honest, and finding someone who can advocate for the why, and not being scared to trial things. I think there's lots of funding out there for piloting things and having a really clear idea of okay, what am I going to do and how am I going to measure the outcomes. I think making sure we have a range of outcomes we're measuring that are both, yes, that occupation, that we're occupation participation focused things that we're really interested in, but sometimes you've got to measure the numbers too. So yeah, I don't think I have a clear-cut answer. I wish I did, but I think that's the best that we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think there's something about looking at who are our partners. I mean, Larry talked about social prescribers, and we know that there are fantastic arts and creative partners out in local communities. So it's actually looking for who might be potential partners as well, to see, because they might have access to research funding or lottery funds, etc., that could be used. Okay, so thank you for your fantastic presentations, and I think there's a lot of in the chat, people just appreciating the amazing projects that you've done, and a lot of chat around actually the importance of these emerging and creative placements as well. So we're now going to move on.
Brill. Thank you so much, Karen, for facilitating that. And thank you guys for, such a thought-provoking and just an incredible session, really. Thank you for presenting the experiences that you've had, but also acknowledging the barriers that exist when wanting to kind of promote these creative approaches. Thank you for that. It was really stimulating and inspiring. We're now going to swiftly move on to a digital presentation by our third presenter, Helen Mason. Helen is a highly specialist occupational therapist and community artist who will be presenting on advancing clinical and community practice with creative occupational therapy. She'd like us to note that during the presentation, she does quote events from World War I, but meant to quote events from World War II. So just bear that in mind. Onto the presentation.
Hello, my name is Helen Mason. I'm an occupational therapist and a community artist from the Devon area. And I'm really privileged today to be invited to come and talk to you about advancing clinical and community practice in creative health and occupational therapy. So I've been asked to give a 10-minute snapshot of the work that myself and my colleagues have been developing in arts, health and occupational therapy over the last 22 years. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the Nesta-funded Animation in Therapy project and its take-homes, including the importance of collaboration, co-creation, trust, curiosity and respect between professions. A little bit about mapping community provision and a brief introduction to my work in Rise and Rewild, community interest company, conclusion and close. So my interest in arts and health started as a teenager, absolutely loving the theatre and engaging in theatre practice and seeing how it encouraged the confidence in myself and my friends growing up. I think that's what drew me to occupational therapy as a profession that supports and celebrates the creative use of activity in therapeutic healing and work. And when I qualified in 2000, I did my dissertation into the use of inclusive theatre, as I was really inspired by theatre companies such as Chicken Shed and their wonderful work. And in 2004, I was very lucky to be supported by the Arts Council, who at that time and continues to support and champion artists. And they funded me to go and train with Footbid Fantasy Theatre Company. This is an example of an amazing life-size horse that their creative director Penny Saunders created, and I was very lucky to have the opportunity to train with Penny in looking at puppet making. As occupational therapists, we're encouraged to engage in occupations ourselves as part of our CPD, our professional development. It's also really important as a therapist to have a really good awareness of yourself and your own interests and leaning. This is because it's really important when we're working with people that we work to what's going to give them meaning, to connecting with their meaning in their life, their way. And that sometimes means that it's really important that we don't move them towards activities that maybe are more towards our interests rather than theirs. So however, if there are people that are interested in the type of work that you do, it's a wonderful exercise in reflection and creative practice to be able to develop our own skills. And occupational therapists have traditionally always worked with artists in practice, usually called technical instructors. We usually have worked in the past and currently with artists and people working with creative activity within our clinical work. So in 2007, I applied for a grant from the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts. At this point, I was working in an inpatient specialist service and had discovered been asked actually by the young people to bring stop frame animation onto the unit. We'd made a story together. The young people had made models in a story called the New York Penguin Saga. And so I approached the local animation festival called Animated Exeter to connect with artists who had the skills in order to teach me to use stop frame in my work. So I was very fortunate to connect with Susanna Shaw, who did the lighting on Chicken Run for Aardman, Liz Harkman, who's an incredible artist and collaborator in the film industry, and Kari Nygaard, who's an exceptionally talented community artist. And I was also very fortunate at that time to meet Professor Joan Ashworth, who's the head of animation at the Royal College of Art. And so it was really scary, but in a very basic and crass way, I introduced stop frame animation onto the ward, and the young people made their own film, which was an amazing experience for them and for the staff. And it made me realize that there was something about stop frame animation. Coming from a theatre background into stop frame was very interesting, because you can step slightly outside of the process. You don't necessarily have to embody it, you put it into the film. So I can't talk about the process due to the time today, but we made some real strides, and we were very successful in getting the funding for the Animation in Therapy project. There were three main take-homes from the project. The first one was, in order to innovate, it was necessary to come out of the NHS. There were 12 awards given, and Animation in Therapy was the only project that lasted longer than a year. Animation Therapy ran for 11 years. Launched from Aardman Animation Studios in 2008, and supported by the Royal College of Art. It has been an exceptionally exciting journey, working across the world with practitioners from professional artists and professional therapies in collaborating together. The second thing that we found a take home from the project was the use of shared language. So there's language that obviously means something to both professional artists and professional therapists in different areas. And we do speak the same language. However, what was really evident was that the jargon used by professions can sometimes be a barrier to communication. Very brief examples being the word boiling didn't mean anything to me. That's an animation term. The way you reframe in animation is very different to reframing in therapy, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Yes, and also working in arts and health, and the word occupation in occupational therapy means any activity that somebody engages in that has meaning and purpose in their life. So, for example, creative activities would in occupational therapy be referred to as an occupation. This creates a barrier for other professionals and artists wanting to look at the research that has been done by occupational therapy as a profession. Quite often they won't use occupation in their literature searches. Elizabeth Cassian was the psychiatrist that developed occupational therapy as a profession back in the Second World War, as she saw the therapeutic benefit of engaging in arts activities, particularly weaving, crafting, engaging in purposeful, meaningful work. And she founded the occupational therapy profession. I think one of the things that OTs and artists sometimes come across is not being taken seriously and not having funding and time and value. The value of our work often is missed and misunderstood. And so there's more things that we share than makes us different. And sometimes funding and the tensions are the very things that stop innovation happening within our very special and awesome community. So it's wonderful to see the National Centre for Creative Health launching and being taken seriously, which it rightly should be. And it's a wonderful time for occupational therapy, creative therapies and professional artists to come together to continue to build on the work that's been done before us and to innovate some more, because I think it holds the key to the change we need to see in our society. And like the Nesta project found, sometimes we have to do that outside of traditional structures in order to co-create. So to conclude, Animation in Therapy project really helped in scoping my practice, in discovering the shared language we have and our complementing skills. And it was wonderful to have the space outside of, you know, traditional structures and the stresses of clinical practice, to take the time to do that together. Respect, curiosity, co-creation and collaboration, and moving away from those tensions and the fears sometimes that occur when trying to be heard and being shut down within different professions. So it's about actually taking those things away and being able to co-create together, and sharing our value of creative activity for heart, mind, body and soul. I think occupational therapy, creative therapies and professional artists working in community health and arts practice share the same experience of not being taken seriously. In occupational therapy, it was joked that we were redcoats, that we were entertainers. Actually, I celebrate being an entertainer, because if I'm engaging someone and they're engaged and they are motivated and there's effort and they are in charge of their own healing journey and are flying, that is one of the key things that we need within therapy. And actually, sometimes you don't need a qualified therapist, you need somebody that can ignite that. And that's why in occupational therapy, we would call it artists coming on board as technical instructors. But that creates a hierarchy, and actually I think it's here. But in doing this, it's about creating, we have a code of conduct and practice from HCPC, so it's finding that support for artists so that they can co-create with us, and we can find our tribe and advance the work that we're all trying to achieve through quality evidence-based practice and an understanding that as human beings, creativity is a real key to unlocking healing, both on an individual and on at community level. So investment in time, funding, recognition of craft, and I think we all have a part to play, all of us who believe in the creative arts and the therapeutic value, to pull together to be able to be taken seriously. And yes, that's why this work and this time where we have to come and talk and to communicate and to dream is very exciting. So thank you for your time listening to me today. My name's Helen Mason. You can find me on Twitter at Animate Therapy, or email me at helen@riserewild.co.uk. I'm very passionate about finding out why people fall in to needing support. So for example, Desmond Tutu once said, we need to stop just pulling people out the river, we need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I think that the arts and health and creative activity holds the key to enabling us to understand people better, and that can only support better care for our communities. So thank you very much for your time.
Real, absolutely brilliant, Helen. Thank you. Yeah, so much for that. Your kind of entrepreneurial attitude when it comes to OT is just excellent, and your work in and with the voluntary and cultural sectors is just fabulous. So particularly thank you for focusing on, you know, the questions that we had in the Q&A just a minute ago about the kind of barriers that that exist when we want to practice creatively, like language. You know, this whole year have been trying to think about, what are the biggest barriers? And you're right, the use of occupation instead of activity is exactly one of those barriers. So thank you for that. We're going to go to a break now. So we'll see you back in 15 minutes. So
welcome back, everyone. Before we get started on the second half of the webinar, we're just going to ask Alexis to explain about Jamboard. I think you may have all had links to the Jamboard, but Alexis will show you how to use it. Over to you, Alexis.
Okay, hold on a second, I'll just get it up. Okay, so in a minute, I'll put some links in the chat, and Jamboards are quite easy to use. So the first one we're going to send you is just about why you came here today, and there's 4 slides. So you can just fill in each page. You can click along the top here to get to each question. It's actually only 3 slides. And then at the side here, you've got a variety of different things you can use, creative tools you can use. I would probably suggest just having a post-it note or a sticky note. You can click on the sticky note here. I just put test in. You can write whatever you want to, make it different colors, make it nice and creative, and then press save. And that will save your sticky note to the Jamboard. So you can write whatever you want to. You can also use a pen and everything like that, but sticky notes are probably the nicest thing to use. So that's just a quick explanation. I'll just put the link to the first Jamboard that we wanted you guys to fill in just in the chat box now.
Thanks, Alexis. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce Odith Richardson, who's Chair of Council at the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. Odith started her career at Hillingdon Hospital and has been an occupational therapist for over 22 years. Currently, she is Head of Occupational Therapy at the Newcastle upon Tyne Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. Thanks. Over to you, Odith.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see all your smiley faces for those who I can see on screen, and the others that I can't see, well, good morning anyway. I am just going to share a few brief thoughts with you today, just around creative OT and some of the things that we can do. I know you've been talking a lot about creativity and how you can use that to support health and well-being for our population this morning. So I looked at psychology today, and they talked a little bit about creativity that's sort of fostering resilience, sparkling joy, and providing opportunities for self-actualization. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but it just means that there's some type of creativity in all of us. And traditionally, we've got OTs who work in traditional areas, but more recently, we're starting to explore some of those other non-traditional areas. And so it's really good. Just a few reflections. I looked at the Office for National Statistics, and it says that 7.2% of adults report to be lonely. And that's a significant amount of our population. And they also mentioned that areas of higher concentration of young people and areas with higher unemployment are those areas that are most affected by loneliness. And this is where we could have some creativity coming into some of the interventions that we make to support people's well-being. So we know that humans are occupational beings. And of course, when we're deprived of occupation, we know that this results in some form of imbalance for us. So I'm just going to share a couple of opportunities that I had to support creativity in some different forums. I believe Marcus spoke to you this morning about the work he did on his role emerging placement with our museums, because I know he's from the Northeast. And I'm just going to expand on that a little bit in terms of some work that I did as part of, it was an exchange museum research project. And it was around exploring shared South Asian, African, and Caribbean identities and histories in Britain today. And we looked at it through the themes of empire, migration, and life in Britain. And it was a research project, as I said, and there were a range of creative outputs as a result of those connections. There was a central hub to ensure the participation for community groups. And one of my roles was to engage with community members. So I looked at our patient experience group and I asked for some support from there. I looked at some other community groups that I was in touch with and I asked for some support. And we had quite a good mix of patients and ex-patients participating in this research project. And although it was particularly looking around race, equality, and diversity, this project could be extended to anywhere across any of the protective characteristics. So the project resulted in 13 national events. It was funded by the Museum of Scotland, and we had 646 in-person participants from 13 museums across the country. We reached over 24,831 people, 495,000 viewers, and 31,000 impressions on social media. They produced knowledge that has spoken to leadership and strategy across some of the partner organizations. And there were a number of creative outputs as a result of this project. So we had things like music and theater performances. We had temporary exhibitions. We had the spoken word and poetry. There were some panel discussions. There were filmmaking. There was stationery design and co-production. And there was even an interfaith ceremony. And these are some of the words that the folks who participated. So one of the participants said, the project has literally been life-changing for me. I've been able to do things that I didn't think I was able to do. And then the other one said, the project got me out of the house. I've made some great friends, which has helped with my isolation. So very creative, something totally out of the ordinary, and something that we as OTs can support in terms of how we work with some of these creative agencies. And it's all about ensuring that people's well-being is supported, because not everybody, we're all different personality types, and so different things will reach us in different ways. So OTs, as we know, are enablers of creative heart. We've got an OT over in the Northeast called Helen Parker, and Helen has just introduced a project with Urban Green. And that project was introduced as part of to my OT team within Newcastle Hospitals. And this project is offering free nature-inspired hearts and wellbeing program, craft, print, and pottery workshops, both online and in person. And it's around harnessing the power of nature and creativity to improve health and well-being. And Helen's encouraging folks from the RVI to use Lee's Park, which is next door to the hospital. So the OTs are taking patients across to the park, especially the longer stay patients, to participate in some of these creative products. And it's helping with well-being for patients. And so that's one of the projects that's a really informal one, but it's really appreciated. And it's also beneficial to us as staff, because when you get out in nature, sometimes you get a little bit more creative. And the fact that it's in the park makes it even more worthwhile. And so the other thing that we've done around in the Northeast is around music as preparation for occupation and music as occupation. Number for our long-term patients, we know that music triggers the communication areas of the brain. And so on our elderly care dementia wards, we tend to use a lot of music, and the OTs tend to get involved. They'll bring their guitars in, or they'll play different music, and that will get our patients in the mood. And we have what we call the Wellbeing Hub. And it's been hosted by CNTW, but it was created as a result of COVID to provide wellbeing support for staff across the ICS within the Northeast and North Cumbria region. And some of the stuff that they offer things like dancing, Bollywood dancing. They offer performing arts. They offer us the opportunity to paint and to reflect. And they use music in terms of, one of the very ones that I liked and that I enjoyed, it was music as a result of helping us to recover from grief. And that was a performance by choreographers Lizzie Q. Ross and Heather Richmond. And it's titled A Time to Mourn and a Time to Dance. And a number of people participated in that event. I found it really beneficial, and they're about to roll it out across the region. So we do a lot of singing within the trust as well. We've got the NCCH choir, so they sing every Tuesday afternoons. And now that we're coming up to Christmas and Halloween, they've got lots of appointments, so they'll sing at lunchtime within the foyer. Patients do feel the benefits of that. And so that's one other way of relieving stress and being very creative and supporting well-being. So those are some of the things that we're doing in the Northeast, and I've really benefited from it. So as OTs, I know that you do have the well-being of everybody at heart, those of your colleagues, those of your patients, those of your clients, and that we are very creative in terms of being OTs. We can always be creative and do something very different. And so I encourage you, and I'm going to finish with this part of our strategy that encourages us to open up. It says, to open up to new opportunities and people, joining forces, forming alliances, and getting more people to see occupational therapy as a solution to their needs. And using creative therapy, using creative approaches is one area that as OTs we can continue to make a difference. So as you go out there and open your creative wings, I encourage you to continue to do what you can just to do something different so that we can continue to support the well-being of our population. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Edith. That was fascinating. I was really interested to hear in all the work that you're doing across the Northeast. I'd like to know more about that actually, so I might catch up with you afterwards. But very inspiring for all the workforce and all the people on this webinar, many of whom are obviously occupational therapists. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Helen Chatterjee now, who is going to chair a panel discussion.
Thank you, Alex. Well, we've got a fantastic range of speakers for you next, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a second. So this is a more relaxed opportunity for us to quiz some of our experts and specialists in this area. So we posed a few questions for them, and we're going to ask them how they respond to some of the challenges and opportunities around embedding creative health in occupational therapy. So if I can invite our four panelists, Karen, Miranda, Helen and Jules, to the stage. I don't know if Jules has been able to join us. Can't see her yet. Here she is. Hello, Jules. Lovely to see you. So to kick us off, maybe I can ask Karen just to remind us, you introduced yourself earlier, but if you could just say a little bit about, again, who you are and what your interests are in this area, and then I'll ask Helen to do the same. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Helen. So Karen Norman, Director of Practice and Innovation. And as I sort of said earlier, my focus really is around the occupational therapy workforce, and in particular, thinking about where we can show leadership and where we show our creative and innovative side, and it's really about how we can promote that within the OT community so that we can share ideas and build, but also actually externally. Just to demonstrate actually how effective occupational therapy expertise can be.
Brilliant, thank you, Karen. Next up, my lovely colleague who I've known for many years and worked with her on many projects, Helen Schön. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. So I'm Helen Schön. I'm an occupational therapist. I worked for SLAM, South London and Maudsley NHS Trust for a long time. I was head of art strategy, an occupational therapist as well. But currently I'm an independent consultant in arts, heritage, health and wellbeing. And I'm steering a couple of projects or advising on one. The steering of a project in Kirkham, Lancashire, a heritage health and wellbeing programme funded by Historic England and Fylde Council, and I'm delighted that my colleague Sue Flowers is here, who's delivering the Phoenix Rising programme. And then the other one is with the University of Oxford. They have a social prescribing, cultural prescribing network that they're developing, so I'm advising on that as well. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. And Miranda Cunningham, welcome.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, my name's Miranda Cunningham. I'm an occupational therapist and a lecturer at the University of Plymouth in Devon. And my previous practice was as an OT in mental health. And I was drawn to occupational therapy because of the potential for creativity within the profession. And I think as all of us on this call today really understand the power of creativity in terms of supporting health and well-being. I've used arts-based practice in my clinical practice. I try and get it into the curriculum, and I'm really inspired by being here today because I want to get more of it into our curriculum. I think it's really important actually, and some of the conversations we've been having already in terms of gaining confidence so that we can use arts and creativity more in practice and having the confidence to do that. So yeah, that's why I'm here today.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Miranda. And last but by no means least, our wonderful colleague, Jules Ford, who has worked in this in the area of creative health for many years. Jules, could you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Helen. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I've been around it for quite a long time now. I'm actually a nurse by profession and registration, but I'm currently working in NHS England, so I'm the interim joint head of social prescribing. While Nick Gitcham, who is the substantive head of social prescribing, is on a secondment, and she's a passionate OT, so she would have been here today if she could have been. So yeah, very pleased to be here. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, and thanks to all of our 4 panelists. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you all to kick off with our first question. So we've heard a lot today about the role of arts, heritage, the outdoors and creativity, and embedding that into the OT role, and how that can be used as a route to innovation as well as improving patient outcomes. And I wondered if you could each have a think about this question and the role that creative occupational therapy could have in improving health outcomes, and particularly in relation to health inequalities. So I don't know who would like to kick us off first. Karen, you look like you're about to speak.
I was just reaching for my unmute, so thanks, Helen. I've just had some, various thoughts this morning, which I think sort of fit really around that question. I referred earlier to, and I think it was in one of the questions about, the pressures of working within a medical model, and I think it's not really around the medical model; it's the system that most occupational therapists work within. Makes it really challenging. The first 2 speakers, when they talked about their activity box in the local museum, part of me was like, that's fantastic, and part of me felt a little bit sad because actually I was doing that in a community mental health team in the early 90s, and it wasn't innovative practice, it was just normal practice to use reminiscence boxes and work with local museums. And I think one of the things that's been lost, the enormous amount of pressure that's within the system, that means that occupational therapists don't have the space and capacity to find out about local assets and to go out and develop and strengthen those partnerships. So I think it's really important that occupational therapists look at what they're doing, their day-to-day working, and think, is it occupation focused? And at RCOT, we've got a nifty little piece of a short sort of guide to help you ask those questions. If it's not, why are you doing it? And is this best use of your expertise as an occupational therapist? And then I think we've got to start using the language and the policy drivers that are already within the system. Talking about being strengths-based, talking about place-based delivery, talking about being assets-based, to put your argument to create some space within your working week and within your working time to be able to make those links, build those partnerships and develop it. And I think that's where we create the opportunity to challenge. There is a fantastic push and movement around co-production. And we've seen some fantastic examples of, I can think of one in pulmonary community rehab, where the community rehab program was developed and co-produced with the populations that they serve. And I think the only way we can address health inequalities is if we go out to our local partners to find out how we might reach the populations most in need, because so many times they are not the ones that are accessing existing services. So I think there are these levers, strengths-based, co-production, using those language to frame arguments to create those space so that you can connect with those population groups and work with them to develop services that work for them. And I know we're talking specifically about being creative occupational therapy. I celebrate that, but I also feel slightly personally irritated by it, because I think occupational therapy should be creative and it should just encompass it. It shouldn't be a thing that we refer to. It should be embedded in the way that we work.
Thank you, Karen. That's really, really helpful, super insightful, I think, in terms of that reaching out to community organisations to help understand local needs and local public health concerns. Anybody else want to come in terms of health inequalities? Miranda, Helen?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Shall I go ahead?
Go for it, Helen.
Build on what Karen was talking about around the sort of essentially asset-based community development and the kind of co-production, and a kind of a term that I've liked using recently is about boundary spanners that Norma Dakin created in her book around arts, health and well-being. So artists typically could be boundary spanners, but I think very much that OTs are crossing different boundaries. But an example of two projects that I've been very involved in where OTs have been like key in this development is with Tate Modern. Actually, it was a place that we did some projects, and one of them was called the Journeys of Appreciation Programme. I put it in the chat. So that work started with inpatient older adults at SLAM, South London and Maudsley, working with the ward managers and the occupational therapists who we developed this programme, starting with Tate Modern interactive gallery workshops. Then I undertook a mental wellbeing impact assessment, which really revealed quite a lot of interesting things around inequalities, access, enhancing control, resilience, community assets, and participation and inclusion. And that report is available, and I could send that if people are interested. It was about 10 years ago, and that led on to further funding from the Maudsley charity and a broader programme called JOAP, which was with different museums, Horniman, Dulwich Picture Gallery, for example, etc., etc. And what we found in that report, in that mental wellbeing impact assessment, that the access to a positively regarded and prestigious shared public space such as Tate Modern had a significant positive effect. But we also recognised that there was difficulties with transport, and so it meant that we led on to ensuring that we had taxis as part of the programme, and also that the staff, the ward staff, were backfilled, so to speak. So there was always this sort of core monthly cultural shift, so that it became a programme that lasted for 10 years. And more. And then another project at Tate Modern was also in 2017. I led a 2-day public programme, co-produced with occupational therapists, artists with lived experience, arts therapists and psychiatrists, and it was called Art in Mind. And that was one of the things we were looking at, is actually around challenging stigma. So using the art as a kind of a conduit for conversation to members of the public, and we did that evaluation with King's College London. So that's sort of an essence of those.
Thanks, Helen. And there's lots of requests for those reports, so please do, after the panel, put them in the chat. Miranda, you were going to come in on issues around health inequalities.
Yeah, I think, these are wonderful examples of practice at grassroots level, and I think that's all absolutely fabulous. And I think for me particularly, to understand how these examples work is really helpful in terms of if you want to implement this in your practice. And I suppose the other area then that we need to focus on is very much at a structural level, is all this advocacy. I know we've spoke about that, haven't we? And we've even talked about being, Helen's talk about being an entertainer, and us grappling with the basket weaving, all those notions of where this work is. And I think part of the reason that maybe we haven't occupational therapy has moved away and joined the medical model is because of that understanding of the value of this work. And I think, you know, we all have a role in advocating and shouting about it more. And I think it's fabulous that we've got the National Centre for Creative Health. It's fabulous that we've got the Creative Health Review. And I think we all need to participate in that. And I think, you know, we need to be confident and proud about what creative activities can do for people. People understand it intuitively. We all understand how exercise can help our health, but I think there's a movement. Well, it feels to me like there's a movement now, and I think we need to get that at those levels where it gets into policy, and that's where we have to think about politics, isn't it? And it's, you know, something we don't always want to do, but I think it's really important that we you know, we are advocates also for this kind of work. So yeah.
Thank you, Miranda, and that really nicely, I think, leads us on to our next question I'd like to think about, which is that, so we've heard such fantastic, Jules, you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, can I just say, Helen, I think that this has huge reach actually with health inequalities. I think, you know, a lot of the arts and prescription schemes, etc., we have really seen a much bigger uptake of the non-traditional kind of approaches in communities that the medical community often described as hard to reach. Of course, they're not hard to reach, it's just that we don't offer anything that is appealing. So I think there's something there that's really quite key and important. And definitely in terms of the core 20+5 approach, the NHS approach to health inequalities, there is an opportunity. There are 5 priority clinical conditions, and also for children, slightly different set for children. There's an opportunity on those pathways to have creative health interventions at every point. They're end-to-end pathways. And certainly some of the work I've done previously with OTs at a kind of strategic commissioning level, very much, you know, chronic pain management, you know, working with diverse communities, etc., and embedding into the guts of an integrated care system what a commissioning approach ought to look like, or could look like, if you truly embed co-production with the people that are using the services and the clinicians and the commissioners and the artists, then actually, you know, you get some really quite profound change, and you get to reach people who wouldn't typically necessarily come forward for the standard magnolia wall NHS type offers, basically. So just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Jules. And I think I'm wondering if you can, in fact, start by kicking us off with our next question, which sort of relates really to these points that you've raised. We've heard about these fantastic examples of projects, different types of innovation that's gone on across different services. And what we wanted you to think about next is how we can ensure that equitable delivery of creative health across services, sectors and systems. You've been really brilliant at that. You're a really great advocate, as everybody is on the panel. What do you think, how do you think we can do that across these different parts of the system? How do you overcome those sorts of barriers, which is what we'll be coming on to next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it often happens this way, doesn't it? We go full circle. So when I trained as a nurse and worked with OTs, what I loved about OTs was just that kind of intrinsic focus on function, not on label or diagnosis, and that kind of creative ability to be able to find solutions, to work with an individual or a patient to find solutions. And I think that your time is coming back. I think now is the right time. Your point, Karen, about the context and the medicalization, but I think that focus to biopsychosocial is definitely, I'm hearing a lot more about that now. That's very core to personalized care. And I think the big opportunity we've got is integrated care systems. So I can put some links in the chat in a minute, but you know, if you look at the guidance around that, it specifically talks about non-traditional approaches. It talks about co-production. It talks about personalized care, and the idea that it's at system level, it's at place level, and it's at neighborhood level. So, you know, the opportunity to do things differently, it positions the power in a different way than it has done previously. So huge challenges. I wouldn't underestimate the challenges around those integrated care systems. But I think huge opportunity and a mandate, if you like, that is coming in from government through the Health and Care Act to enable collaboration, to encourage collaboration, to bring people together. So whether it's, you know, the program I reference, you know, whether it's an OT running an amazing supported self-management program and then stepping down into arts on prescription and then everybody coming together, or whatever the permutation might be, just that sense of being able to work together to join funds. I think there's a lot of boundary spanning to be had actually within ICSs. So that would be the strategic hook I would look at, Helen.
Thanks, Jules. Do our other panelists want to come in on that? Ensuring equitable delivery of creative health across services.
Yeah, I'd like to, you know, just follow on from Jules, because I think it's absolutely key. I think integration and the ICSs are a fantastic opportunity for us. And we've got so much information available to us that we need to be able to, you know, make sure that we are definitely accessing it. So you've got your JSNA in each area. So you've got your joint strategic needs assessment. It gives you really clear picture of your local demographic populations and their needs. So you've got that starting point. People are absolutely desperate within the system for solutions. So if you can present your ideas and pitch this as a solution to help, and any pilots or test of change that you're able to argue and put forward, just think about actually making sure that you capture quality of care outcomes, not just occupational outcomes, health and well-being outcomes. It's not just about, you know, how many goals people have reached and the benefits for the individual. I mean, that's our main driver. That's so important. But actually thinking about the value to the overall system, because that is absolutely key for winning over and getting those services commissioned and more widespread. And think about, actually, it's not just sort of reducing reliance on acute and crisis services and reliance on social care. It's also thinking about, are you supporting, has this enabled people to return or remain in work? Is this supporting people to manage their ongoing health condition? Is it reducing reoffending? You know, so just thinking more creatively. And with children, it's thinking, are they actually, you know, able to stay in mainstream schools? Are they able to use mainstream community resources out there? So although they might, you know, you might be doing a specific creative project for a targeted group, are you able to help those children then transition into more, you know, I'm using the term mainstream, but more, you know, widely used, you know, creative activities out in the local community. So it's making sure we capture that as well, because, you know, that's the only way we're going to get investment in you know, wider services, and ensuring that actually this becomes the norm. And it's not just if you happen to live in a particular postcode and there happens to be, you know, a particular couple of individuals that try and push a project forward.
That's really helpful, Karen. Thank you. Helen.
Yes, thank you. So for me, an example would be the wonderful work that Sue Flowers of Phoenix Rising are doing in Kirkham, and as I mentioned, Sue's in the webinar here. So and what we're looking at, and what Sue and her team are doing brilliantly, is looking at the sustainability and the partnerships at a local level. So we have, and I'll put it in the chat, the web links to the archive work and the library work and the wonderful things like that. But one of the things that I found really useful in developing the feasibility study for the Heritage and Health and Wellbeing programme incorporating social prescribing was having some really brilliant advice from public health colleagues at Lancashire County Council, and they've gone on to provide some expertise around a way of sustaining and grassroots level involvement, and it's called participatory budgeting. And Amanda Spavin is going to be advising some of the groups coming from the Phoenix Rising programme. But what's great for me in my role, working also advising for the Reconnect University of Oxford cultural prescribing programme, is that I'm actually writing a case study about participatory budgeting for their purposes. So that idea of cross-fertilisation, I think, is really important. So we're sharing the knowledge, and it's something that's a sort of more democratic approach. And I'm just thinking around small pots of money, developing, and what OTs do brilliantly is around encouraging people to devise and lead their own groups, if you see what I mean. So I can put some more links to that as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Helen. Miranda, did you want to come in thinking about those kind of services, systems, sector interlink type challenges?
Yeah, and I think clearly it is a challenge, but I think like people are saying, I think the momentum is there, and I think we're certainly working towards it. I think from within a higher education perspective, I think this creative health needs to be higher up on our agenda, and so that, you know, our students and our students are our ambassadors wherever they go out to work on placement, and our students work across a variety of sectors, so they're not just in NHS settings, they're in social care, they're in third sector organisations, they're in schools, prisons, you know, the list is endless, and that's the beauty of occupational therapy as a profession, that we are so diverse. And I think, you know, part of our role within higher education is to, again, support for that advocacy for creative health approaches across all these sectors.
Love that you're talking about students as ambassadors, since it's one of our students that has brought about today's creative offerings. So absolutely agree with you, Miranda. And that sort of nicely leads us on really to thinking about, yeah, as we address those, what are some of the challenges in your areas? You're all coming from slightly different perspectives, different professional backgrounds, different areas of practice. And what we're interested in is what within those roles, what do you think are the challenges of using creative approaches, and what can be done to overcome them? So I don't know who would like to kick us off there.
I can kick off.
That'd be lovely. Thank you, Helen.
One of the ideas that I think is really important is giving people the chance to do creative tasters. I think quite often many people have a kind of nervousness around being creative, artistic, and all those sorts of worries that they've not been very good at school, so to speak, and things like that. And so a couple of examples, when I mentioned about the Tate exchange programme, Art in Mind, and so we deliberately had parallel sessions led by artists with lived experience and also art therapists at the same time, all sorts of lovely drop-in taster creative sessions that people could take part in with their family and friends, and it was really delightful sort of atmosphere for those 2 days. And so recently in June, actually, for the University of Oxford, they had a knowledge exchange event bringing link workers, social prescribers together with cultural providers and other stakeholders. And I advised Dr. Stephanie Tierney around the similar sort of notion around having parallel sort of creative tasters, and that's what we did. We did that in the summer, and it was really well received. It was really fun, and it really sort of enabled sort of lots of lovely chats and kind of engagement, and fostered sort of those connections, etc., etc. So that's a kind of one that I would advocate, is that sort of approach.
Yeah, that's really helpful, thank you. And that kind of, you know, experiential approach, you know, doing it by experience yourself is the best way to help understand what the potential is. I wondered if our other speakers, Karen, you look like you're popping in.
Thanks. Yeah, I think for me at the moment, and I just think for the occupational therapy workforce, vacancy rates are high. People are really struggling. I know in Greater London, last time I checked in, they had just under 600 vacancies in the Greater London area. You know, it's varying across the country, but we are on the occupation shortage list. We know that retention is a big issue, and resilience at the moment coming out of the pandemic. Services are absolutely stretched, and people are really struggling on a day-to-day level. So I can see that this could land with people going, well, this is great, this is all very well and nice, but actually it's impossible where I'm at now. So I think, you know, there are some opportunities that I totally support Miranda using our occupational therapy learners as our ambassadors, but making the most of them on placement. We can give them projects to do, which is fantastic for their learning, to go out and find out about local assets, or go and explore you know, the needs of the local population. So use our students, they're a fantastic asset, and you know, can add so much as you know, Marcus you know, demonstrated, our earlier speakers. But I think as well, we know that people who are most satisfied and resilient within their career are people that have a portfolio. So maybe that's one day a week doing research, or, you know, opportunities to work on different projects. So I think, you know, putting the case to argue that although it doesn't help in the immediate short term, in the longer term, the benefits it's going to have overall on the system is the way to go. And to do a project where you are connecting with the arts, where you're you know, connecting with different creative groups, will really get you back in touch with occupational therapy and who you are and why you've joined the profession. So I just think it is worth taking some time. Might have to do it outside of work, but just to think about actually how can I be involved in a project, as much for other people, but also just for my own resilience and reward.
Really helpful, Karen, thank you. And I just wondered, picking up on the point that both you and Miranda have made about that kind of, you know, the workforce development at that training stage, and whether this is a chance for us to think about this new collaboration between RCOT and the NCCH and many other organisations who've joined us and individuals today. And we've heard some fantastic outcomes from placements, and thinking then about the curriculum and the OT curriculum and what opportunities there might be for us at that kind of national strategic level to think about spreading some of that fantastic work that we've heard of today, to ensure that all trainee OTs get those sorts of opportunities. So it would be really good to pick your brains about that at a future date. That's just a placeholder for perhaps a next event, Hannah. Jules, did you want to come in? You've worked in this area for many years, and you've had to think about embedding creative health and arts, creativity, access to the outdoor, social prescribing across multiple roles, as from a practitioner, from somebody who's run an organisation, now being involved in, previously being involved in commissioning. Can you sort of encapsulate in that, you know, what we've heard a lot about, the kind of some of the challenges around embedding the evidence base and gathering that sort of evidence, and yeah, what you feel the challenges are in terms of using creative approaches and what can be done to overcome them.
I think a lot of it's about relationship. So, I mean, my experience commissioning this is that people are so focused in on the medical model that actually it doesn't have, it's not always about evidence for credibility. It's just that it feels a long way from people's day-to-day work. And so there's something about sharing and working together and, you know, drawing on that old, you know, MDT approach that actually really helps share some of the ideas and the thinking. So I think there are some mechanisms for that are available. So the OT role in primary care, you know, working alongside social prescribers, for example, that's a really obvious link to spread it within primary care. I think there are also some kind of tools and approaches, products, if you like. So there's a piece of work that NCCH and NHS England are working on together. It's a toolkit. I'm not sure whether that's already been mentioned in the webinar, Alex, but you know, just an amazing toolkit that could be used by anybody, could be used by any profession, it could be used by commissioner, it could be used by anybody, to just see the kind of application of creative health in different contexts. So that could be at sort of activity level, or it could be at intervention level within a clinical pathway. So really kind of I see everything on a continuum. So, you know, we have a continuum of need, we have a continuum of provision, we have a continuum of people who support individuals along, you know, according to different kinds of complexity and need. So whether, you know, we've got art psychotherapists, we've got art on prescription, we've got community participatory arts, that's all a continuum. So I think if we blur some of the boundaries sometimes and just actually talk to each other and share ideas and build relationships, that goes a long way.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Jules. I wanted to sort of add as an extra quick question, and it sort of relates to, I was really interested, Karen, in the point that you made about that, as well as collecting those sort of health outcomes evidence, that we're also interested in things like quality of care outcomes, return to work, employability skills, etc. I'm sort of very conscious that we have a lot of discussions around collecting the evidence, what it means to different people. Jules, you just mentioned that, you know, the sort of pressure to fit into that kind of biomedical model, and a lot of what we're talking about here are these kind of wider social determinants of health. And I wondered if you guys had thoughts about how we might best pick up those kind of wider kind of social outcomes, if you like, through the sorts of work that you're doing. And that might be, you know, thinking of innovative methods. You've all mentioned the importance of co-production. It might be through the partnerships that you have. I'm putting you a bit on the spot here because we didn't pose this question before, but I think it's really interesting. And I see in the chat that other people have been picking up on that, you know, how interested they would be in things like that, those kind of wider social aspects that don't fit directly into the biomedical model, and how we might think about building that into our evidence base. Any thoughts, Karen?
Yeah, I think going back to Jules's point about it is you're talking to people. So you might look around and think, well, I just don't know how I can capture that, but somebody else will have ideas. It's also looking at things like NICE guidelines to see how have they captured, you know, what have they used, what do they recommend for different population groups. So although they're often very, you know, they're clinically very specific, it's a useful tool for those ideas. I've put a link to our outcomes page at RCOT, but there's some tools there to help people understand what they might be able to capture and the different types of outcomes that are out there. It's also, I would really strongly urge people to link in with their local universities as well. And, you know, when we talk about partnerships, you know, we often think about partnerships within our existing areas of work, and for many occupational therapists that will be in sort of health or social care. But I think we've got universities there. It's link in, and some universities, your local university might not have an occupational therapy program, but they may have health economists. You know, there may be other programs there with real skills to help us think about that. And there are organisations such as the King's Fund, again, that provide guides and you know, will highlight different projects which may give you ideas. So, you know, it's doing the research, but not thinking that you have to come up with the answers and the full package yourself. Think about your allies, think about your colleagues, and also just, you know, if you're co-creating, talk to the people you're co-creating with. What would be meaningful for them? Because they may have ideas, they won't know necessarily how to capture that as an outcome measure, but that's where your skills and expertise comes in to help you think, how do we capture that?
That's brilliant. Thank you, Karen. And Miranda and I were nodding vigorously then to talk of collaborating with universities. And in fact, I'll take this opportunity to post in the chat in a second funding. So, you know, myself and many other academics and colleagues who are on this call, the National Centre for Creative Health, are working with UK research and the NIHR and various research councils on thinking about how we can better fund this area of research, particularly those questions about better service and systems connection between community organisations, different types of professionals, through integration and working directly with integrated care services. So I'll put a link to that. And in fact, the Phoenix Rising project that Helen mentioned is funded by one of those grants from that programme. So I'll put the link into that. And I don't know if you wanted to come in at all, Jules, Miranda, Helen. I mean, Helen, you talked about the importance of case studies, and that's a really great opportunity, isn't it, to bring in some of that wider evidence and those other sorts of outcomes.
Yes, and in fact, I was thinking about other partners in the museum and gallery network, such as Engage and GEM, and I was reflecting on a journal article in Engage. I can't remember, it was several years ago, but it was by a brilliant OT colleague of mine at SLAM at South London Maudsley. She managed a gallery programme in Brixton, part of the Sharp rehab centre, and she wrote an article called I Use Colours Not Pills to Calm Me Down, an NHS community-based gallery that embraces the concept of mental health recovery. And that was kind of partly, I think, my suggesting the opportunity to Anna Croucher to write the article and to look at other kinds of avenues to sort of really shout about this wonderful, innovative, co-produced work. So I'd advocate for those journals to do that, as well as I guess with the Kirkham work, it was really fantastic that, so Historic England are very interested in fact, they've got a new strategy on wellbeing and health, and they had a special issue in February, and so I was asked to co-author an article about the work we're doing in Kirkham with Andrew Chatterjee, and that is another example of sort of trying to sort of spread the word really about the sort of complex community-based work, you know, that we're trying to do.
That's really helpful, thank you. And it picks up Karen's point about, you know, thinking about looking at NICE guidelines for complex interventions. These are complex approaches we're talking about. They are multi-agency, multi-sector, but that has, I think, is where the strength is, isn't it? In using these creative approaches, it is multi-dimensional. That's to benefit for those individuals involved, but also the partners involved, hopefully.
I would just like to come in and just say, we're talking about people connecting with universities, and I would say as an academic, it's been amazing for me to connect with artists, because that's taken me back to my roots and my desire to join this profession. And I've been undertaking a research study with a local social action-based arts group who are working in their communities with parents and children in schools doing arts-based projects. And actually that is so mutually beneficial. It's been really powerful, I think, and that's really been inspiring for me, again, to be able to take this back into the curriculum. It just seems hard sometimes to find each other. And I think this is why this is so great today. It feels like this is, you know, part of a wider movement, and I think that's what we just really need to be able to get to each other and talk to each other, don't we? And sometimes I think institutions feel a bit impenetrable, but actually, you know, I would just encourage people to search for university websites, search up the academics, and send them an email. You know, I would say all my colleagues in our OT school have got passions about occupation, so would be really delighted to speak to people. So I would really encourage that. And yeah, like I say, it's been wonderful working with local artists who are doing this work day to day.
That's brilliant, really helpful. Jules, did you want to come in on any of those points?
Yeah, I mean, just all agree with everything really. And I would just also say the power of the story. So I think, you know, the point about case studies and films, and case studies not in a kind of dry, disconnected sense, but actually case studies that really do tell someone's story. So, you know, they might tell the story of an individual, they might tell the story of an ICS shifting culture and working in different ways, are just so powerful. So it's that show, not tell. That's the bit in my experience of really trying to embed this and into transformation, different ways of working. It was always the stories. It was what the patients said themselves. It was what the staff said. That's the bit that really affects the change. We are just putting on NHS England, on our NHS Futures platform within the social prescribing space. This is again in partnership with Alex and the NCCH, a space for creative health. So it is a membership space, but it's completely free. It's just an automated join up. So anybody who wants to join that, you know, once we've got it up and running, you're really, really welcome. And what we're trying to do is have lots of examples and a kind of digitized version of the toolkit. So there'll be films, there'll be case studies, and also some kind of themed tagged repository, really, so that people can go and say, okay, well, what does this look like in a space around a particular health condition or for a particular health inclusion group or whatever. So, and if anybody's got any suggestions that we can do on that national platform, anything that you think is useful, please do email me and let me know. I'll put my email address in the chat.
That's fantastic. That's going to be such a useful resource, as is the toolkit. And all of these ideas, projects, case studies, Jules, you talked about the importance of those stories. Please do share them through the Creative Health Review. I'll ask Alexis, the NCCH is leading a review, as Karen and Jules mentioned, into creative health. We'd really love to hear all of those different examples. So we'll put a link to how you can share those stories, case studies, examples, and that wonderful work that you're doing through the Creative Health Review. Well, we've got 5 or 6 minutes left before we move into our breakout room. So I'd just like you each to consider our final question. I'll come to you first, Karen. How can we best champion and advocate the role of OT within creative health? And you've already given some fantastic ideas, but closing thoughts from each of you.
Yeah, I think Jules just made an excellent point about sharing stories, and I think about your local media as well as social media. How can you share those stories? And also, I think sometimes we traditionally have been quite protective of the people that have lived experience and use our services, and we tend not to go to them to advocate on our behalf. But a lot of people are really keen to do that. If they've had a really positive experience, they want to shout about it. And I think, people are used to posting on Instagram and various different media sites about their experience. So, ask the people that you're working with, do you want to talk about it? How would you like to talk about it? And use them, because actually, I go to a lot of conferences and people are on their phones, half listening and half on Twitter and half doing emails, etc. But as soon as somebody comes and talks about their personal experience and the benefit they have, everybody looks up and everybody engages. So, don't just quietly get on with it and pat yourselves on the back. Shout about it, even if it feels uncomfortable, because that's the only way you're going to ensure that you get the recognition, but also further rollout and further investment.
Brilliant advice. Thank you, Karen. Miranda, do you want to pop in?
Yeah, I think being a champion is a thing, isn't it? I think it is making some noise about that stuff, and I think that we can do that from our own position. I know I'm an occupational therapist, and I can advocate for this through occupational therapy channels, but I think we also need to go broader, because we're all convinced, and I think we need to look at channels of really spreading these ideas wider than occupational therapy. And also, I think because there are practitioners out there who aren't occupational therapists who do this work, and I think somebody talked about maybe people being a bit precious about it sometimes, but I think if people are engaging in creativity for health and well-being, then that's fantastic, and we need to celebrate that wherever that comes from, whatever discipline. And I think it is, just being able to get stuff out there, and sometimes that can be through social media, or it can be through your professional bodies magazines like Occupational Therapy News. And let's keep this momentum going. And this is our practice. This is our practice. We feel like we've moved away from it a little bit, but this is our practice. So that's one thing I would say.
Brilliant, thank you. Helen.
Yes, totally about the stories as well. I mean, the films that I've put in the early part of the chat were Power of Story. So this was Maudsley charity funded, and I produced 4 films, one some of them about the Journeys of Appreciation programme. So just for your reference, but also thinking about a project that Helen, you were involved with as well, another SLAM project with refugees and asylum seekers experiencing PTSD that take part in a therapeutic gardening project in South London. And we were able to have a creative ceramic bird making project with an artist, Julie Nelson. And I linked up with Helen and Humera Iqbal to look at kind of an evaluation. And my literature review, I turned to occupational therapy journals to sort of try and understand what was going on with the workshops that we were doing. And so I was really delighted to be able to use Wilcox dimensions of occupation, the doing, being, becoming and belonging process. And I'm just thinking about other ways that we can kind of shine a light on the fantastic models of human occupation, etc., that need to be kind of understood further by other people, really.
Yeah, and that makes me think, Helen, you know, about the importance of also sharing across, and Miranda, in terms of those wider academic publications, again, important in the training and research as we're kind of growing the research evidence base in this area. And that's something, you know, that connecting up across academia, working with different types of academics, practitioners, professionals, and as Karen says, people with lived experience and experts by experience. And involving them in the whole kind of, you know, research and evaluation process are really important. Jules, we've got 2-3 minutes left. Any final thoughts as one of our brilliant champions of creative health?
Okay, well, I mean, I just think what I've always loved about OTs is you do what I call, and I nicked from Margaret Donaldson, a phrase called human sense. So, you know, Vessel van der Kolk and his work on PTSD, all about drama and dance. Actually, that's what really helps people. And, you know, Margaret Donaldson, a developmental psychologist who said of Piaget, who had created this really complex task for children and their cognitive development, a thing called the Three Mountains task. And she came along and said, well, it's great if you live in Switzerland, isn't it? What if you're in Birmingham? And she coined this phrase, ecological validity, human sense. And I think that's the key to all of this. None of this is really complicated. It is just human sense. And I think that's what OTs do so brilliantly. You have a holistic, very practical, pragmatic, functional approach. And I think that's absolutely where we need to be. So stories in human sense would be where I would leave it.
A lovely, lovely way to end our panel. And a huge thank you to all of our 4 speakers, Karen, Miranda, Jules, Helen. You've been absolutely brilliant. I've learned so much as always. And it really does feel like that we're at the start of a sort of movement in terms of growing across different professions, practices, areas of expertise, co-production. So thank you for all of your brilliant insights. Can't wait to continue the discussion. And thanks for your inputs today. And over to you, Hannah, because we're going to go into some breakout sessions where we're looking forward to hearing more from the rest of our audience for today.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your contributions and making the time to come today. And yeah, we're grateful to have your input in these really, really important questions. So thank you for that. So in the spirit of what Odeth was saying, of kind of opening our creative wings, we'd love to hear your thoughts before we end this session. So Alexis is going to put us into some breakout rooms, and we're going to use the Jamboard again to kind of collect some of that information. So please make sure in your groups, 1 or 2 of you notes down your conversations. We're going to go into breakout rooms for 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back together and reflect on that time and close the session. So please do stick around. I know breakout rooms aren't always the most inviting of places, but we'd really, really love to hear your thoughts and input. And this is a chance to hear from you, whether it's to evidence good practice or share your thoughts on today. We've got some questions to follow, so please do engage in them. But yeah, Alexis is going to put us into rooms. She'll check in to make sure everyone's doing well, and we'll be back soon.
I hope you got to grips with the Jamboards and you had a useful discussion. So
Karen, I think maybe wait 1 second. I think some people are still coming
not everybody's back. Okay,
no,
I'm just going on to the Jamboards to see.
Maybe if people haven't put anything on the Jamboard quite yet, maybe they want to just take a minute or 2 just to add things to it, because they might be busy chatting. Right, I think we probably have everyone back now.
Fantastic. Okay. welcome back, everybody. I can see I'm looking distracted because I'm looking at the Jamboards and I can see post-it notes whizzing along. So it's my my role really just to sum up some of the key points made within the Jamboard. So I am going to do my best to do that as new stickies come flying in. So the first question is, in what ways could occupational therapists incorporate creative activities into their practice? And I think in my group, I'm going to kick off with a summary of that discussion. It was about confidence to use the evidence base and to articulate why we are doing what we are doing. And I see that we've got other points in here about educating multidisciplinary team and AHP leads about the power of occupational therapy and the occupational therapy process. And I would really urge, if you've never done it before, having a go at a 3-minute pitch to explain occupational therapy, because if you can get that down, you know, that first definition of occupational therapy in a minute, and then follow up as to sort of, you know, the evidence, the, you know, the impact that occupational therapy can have, then you're on to a good start. And I always find it amazing how many occupational therapists really struggle to articulate what they do. With the question about how occupational therapists can be supported to incorporate creative activities into their practice, this key point seemed to be about actually having pilots, developing those partnerships, not feeling that you have to do it alone. I would say learning about what co-production involves, and then you can start to adopt those principles into a pilot, into a project, and really making sure that you think about the outcomes from the off and not do it later on. I think it's really important at that very early stage of thinking about what are we going to do, think about how do we capture what we're going to do, linking in with the universities. And there's a point here about it's down to the universities to also sort of build that confidence into learners as they go out to become living, breathing practitioners, and using those case studies, as we've said, in the panel to illustrate the impact of what you do and that person's experience and journey through the process. And then practical suggestions for next steps. Definitely reaching out and engaging with people that use our services, perhaps setting up cross-sectional interest, special interest groups so that you can share thinking and develop ideas. And we've got another example of a cross-sectional interest group in terms of a multidisciplinary forum. Embrace our creative roots, absolutely. If you've lost touch with them, get back in touch with them. It's very much about what we do. Make sure, as I said, gather that outcomes. I'll keep repeating that because I think we're not confident in doing so. And just, shout out about, what motivates us, what we love about occupational therapy, because I think, often working within the system, that can be ground down. And just reach out and find out about the different communities in your local area, and try and understand actually their experiences, what their needs are, and thinking about existing services. Are they meeting those needs? Are the people in greatest need actually using the services that are designed to work with them? And if they're not, they need to be rethought. And that, again, that's where that co-production comes in. And that's it. I'm going to finish there. So hopefully I've caught most of what was discussed. And what I'd like to do now is go back to you and ask you to get into the chat, because this webinar has been fantastic. We've had great presentations. There's been lots of really interesting questions. I've just been trying to catch up on the chat, some really good discussion on the chat. But so what? You come along, you have a couple of hours. That was all very nice, but so what? So I would like to hear your pledges. What are you going to do as a result of this webinar, what action are you going to take away and follow up? And we know that people are more likely to do something if they make a public commitment. So I'm going to ask you to all put down in the chat the one action that you are going to take away. And also, if we think about SMART, when are you going to do it by? Because it's all very easy to say, I'm going to go and do this, but actually put a limit on the time that you're going to do it. So are you going to do it in the next week, in the next 2 weeks, the next month? And who are you going to involve? So actually try and realise it as not just a nice thing that you think would be good to put down in the chat, but actually something that will be useful so that you can build on the learning from today, and that this session isn't really wasted. It's a building block, it's the start. So I'm going to stop waffling there and ask and be quiet for a minute and ask you all to start to put on the chat. And that includes facilitators as well, presenters that are still with us, to put something down in the chat as well. That's great. Kat is going to be reaching out to occupational therapists about her work. Kimberly's going to plan some protected time. Rebecca's going to contact and collaborate for the pre-reg MSc students.
Aaron, when everyone's doing that as well, it's just to let everyone know, I'll clean the chat up and I'll send it to everyone. So if people do want to share that email address, feel free to put it in the chat as well. It will go to everyone who's attended today as well, those on the actual waiting list as well. So just to let them know.
Fantastic. So it looks like people are engaging and making a commitment, which is great. And I, my commitment will be that RCOT will consider next steps with the National Centre for Creative Health, so that we make sure this isn't just kind of a one-off.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. That's brilliant. And I don't know what that continuing collaboration might look like, but I have noticed it didn't come up in the chat. I think it was on it didn't come up on the Jamboard. I think it was in the chat. This idea of some sort of buddy network to support OT clinicians who are perhaps isolated in being interested in this area within their wider multidisciplinary teams or within their departments. And can they have a network to find mutual support? And then there was a suggestion in the Jamboard around a special interest group. So I think that thing of enabling networks, which is very much, I'm sure, what RCOT is interested in, and we are also maybe one area we could consider collaborating on. I'm just going to say a few last words. It's great to see all your pledges, and I hope that we can keep connected. I think, just from a sort of generally looking at who's in the chat, that probably there are more OTs in this webinar than there are what I would call creative health practitioners who aren't trained as OTs. And I would have liked more of them to be here to hear what you're all saying, because I think those bridging boundary spanning roles, which many of you are already doing, working with artists, would be good coming from the other direction. And I have noticed that one of the arts managers in a hospital has sort of light bulb moment. I'm going to talk to the OTs in my hospital. So those sorts of relationships within institutions definitely could be encouraged. We have quite a lot of connection with what's called the NPAG, the National Performance Advisory Group for art, design, heritage in hospitals, and there are a lot of arts coordinators in hospitals now. I think there are around 70 or 80 hospitals in the country that have arts coordinators, and if you work in those hospitals, you may already know those individuals, but more slightly more formal perhaps way of connecting arts program managers, arts and hospital coordinators with OTs and OT teams might also be something we could push. I was very interested in this thing about language, which always comes up. And, you know, it's a challenge in all of the areas that we work across sectors, obviously, and across silos, and people having their own jargon, which is really inevitable. And I don't know whether there's anything we could do collaboratively around that. I was very struck by this, the comment that the word occupation is not something that people out in the wider creative health field would think to search if they were doing searching the evidence base. So there might be some joint initiative around explaining how these different practices intersect and how different practitioners on either side might access some of the evidence base or the stories or the case studies. So all of these things obviously require quite a lot of work, and we're all very stretched, but I think those are areas I'd be interested in. And then just to go back to Jules saying about relationships, absolutely key relationships, and it's great to have started this relationship with the Royal College, and thank you very much to Hannah for initiating this idea. The MASc, the Masters in Creative Health at University College London, is brilliant at bringing together people with very different professional and personal backgrounds in this collective space around creative health, and is already proving very fruitful in developing those different and new relationships. And thank you to the Royal College of Occupational Therapists for hosting this with us. And thank you to all of our speakers and our chairs and facilitators. And I won't say anything more, but someone else might like to say a few final words. Maybe Hannah should have the last words.
I hadn't prepared any final words, but yeah, I'd just like to extend those thanks. Thank you to everyone who's made time to come. I think that in and of itself is a demonstration that OTs are ready to speak and ready to echo their skills and voices into these creative industries and communities. And it's further evidence that OTs are just brilliant, and creativity is only one of the many ways that we work, but it is an excellent and really exciting way that we work. And so, yeah, just continue the work you're doing. Let's keep connected, keep meeting like this, and yeah,